All right, let's talk about America, the United States of America, land of the free, home of the brave. You know the slogans. This place started as a scrappy bunch of colonies, 13 of them to be exact. They told the biggest empire at the time, Great Britain, to take a hike. And somehow they won. It's like your little cousin beating you in Street Fighter. Nobody saw it coming. This was the underdog story to end all underdog stories, setting the stage for something massive, something unprecedented in the annals of global power dynamics. It was a bold gamble, fueled by ideals of liberty and self-determination, a beacon for many. From those revolutionary roots, America didn't just walk, it sprinted. It grew bigger, stronger, richer. Think of it like a national growth spurt that lasted for centuries. It became an industrial powerhouse. It invented stuff, cool stuff like the internet and Pop-Tarts. Okay, maybe one is more significant than the other. The point is, it became a global superpower, the top dog, the main character on the world stage. For a long time, if something major happened globally, America was probably involved, pulling strings, or at least offering its very strong opinion on the matter. But here's the thing about being on top. It's a long way down. History is full of empires that thought they'd last forever. The Romans, the Ottomans, the British, they all had their moment in the sun. And then, well, things changed. So the big question, is America heading for a similar fate? Are we watching the slow fade of a global giant? Or is this just a rough patch? This isn't just an academic question. It affects everyone, everywhere, because American influence has been that pervasive, that deeply embedded in the global fabric. This essay, folks, is our deep dive. We're going on a journey through America's story. We'll look at its incredible rise. We'll examine its peak when it seemed untouchable. Then we'll get into the tricky parts, the signs of decline, the challenges it faces today. And finally, we'll explore what the future might hold. Will it be a managed decline, a sudden collapse, or maybe, just maybe, a comeback story? Buckle up. It's going to be a wild, informative ride. We're not here to just skim the surface. We're going deep into the heart of the American narrative. So, picture this, 1776, no Wi-Fi, no Netflix. But there's a vibe, a revolutionary vibe. The Founding Fathers, a group of dudes in wigs, decided they'd had enough of British rule. Taxation without representation? Hard pass. So, they penned the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, they wrote. Big words, big ideas. This wasn't just about breaking away. It was about creating a new kind of nation, built on principles of liberty and individual rights, a radical concept for its time, sparking movements worldwide. After the war, which, spoiler alert, they won, came the hard part, building a country. They drafted a constitution, another revolutionary document, checks and balances, separation of powers. It was like designing the ultimate group project, but for a whole nation. Early America was all about expansion. Manifest destiny was the buzzword. It basically meant this land is our land, from sea to shining sea. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the size of the country overnight. Imagine buying something on Amazon, and it's twice as big as you expected, that kind of deal. This expansion, however, came at a tremendous cost to Native American populations, a dark chapter often glossed over in triumphalist narratives. Then came the Civil War from 1861 to 1865, a brutal, bloody conflict. The nation literally tore itself apart over slavery and states' rights. It was America's darkest hour, testing whether a nation conceived in liberty could long endure. Brother fought against brother. The very soul of the country was on the line. The Union victory preserved the nation, but the scars ran deep, and the struggle for true equality for all its citizens was far from over. Reconstruction aimed to heal, but its failures would resonate for generations, laying groundwork for future civil rights battles. Post-Civil War, America hit the fast-forward button on industrialization. Factories sprouted like mushrooms after a rainstorm. Railroads crisscrossed the continent, tying the vast nation together. Steel, oil, innovation, these were the new watchwords. Think of it as America's first tech boom, but with steam engines instead of smartphones. Immigrants poured in, seeking a better life, fueling the workforce. By the early 20th century, the United States was no longer just a regional player. It was an emerging economic giant, flexing its industrial muscles and setting the stage for its eventual global dominance. A transformation that would redefine its role and responsibilities on the world stage. The early 20th century saw the world plunge into chaos with World War I kicking off in 1914. America, for a while, was like that friend who says, "You guys go ahead, I'll catch up." President Woodrow Wilson campaigned on keeping the United States out of the war, but German U-boats sinking ships, including the Lusitania and the infamous Zimmermann telegram, which was basically Germany trying to slide into Mexico's DMs to start a war with the United States, changed things. America joined the Allied effort in 1917. Its fresh troops and industrial output provided a crucial boost, helping to tip the scales and bring an end to the devastating conflict. After the war came the Roaring Twenties. Oh, what a time. Jazz music filled the airwaves, flappers were challenging social norms, the stock market was booming. It felt like the party would never end. People were buying cars, radios, and all sorts of newfangled gadgets. It was an era of unprecedented prosperity and cultural dynamism, but like any wild party, there was a hangover. And this one was called the Great Depression. The stock market crash of 1929 hit hard. Banks failed, people lost their jobs, their homes, their hope. The Dust Bowl turned fertile farmlands into barren wasteland. It was a decade of struggle. Just as America was clawing its way out of the Depression, the world decided to have another massive fight, World War II. This one started in Europe in 1939. Again, America tried to stay out, but then December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. A date which will live in infamy, as FDR said. Japan attacked, and America was officially in the war. This time there was no hesitation. The nation mobilized on an unprecedented scale. Factories that once made cars now churned out tanks and planes. The arsenal of democracy, they called it. Millions of men and women joined the armed forces or worked in war industries. By 1945, the war was over. The Axis powers were defeated, but the world was a different place. Europe was devastated, many old empires were crumbling, and America, it emerged from the rubble as the undisputed global superpower. Its economy was booming, its military was unmatched, and its homeland was largely untouched by the direct ravages of war. This was a pivotal moment. The United States stood at a crossroads, possessing immense power and facing the monumental task of shaping a new world order from the ashes of global conflict, a responsibility that would define its foreign policy for decades to come. The period after World War II, roughly from 1945 to 1991, is often called the American century. And for good reason. The United States was on top of the world, economically, militarily, culturally, you name it. America was leading the charge. Think of it as the ultimate winning streak. The American dream was in full swing. Suburbs were popping up, families were buying homes with white picket fences. Everyone seemed to have a new car and the latest appliances. It was an era of unprecedented prosperity for a large segment of the population, fueled by post-war industrial strength and global demand. A big part of this dominance was America's role in rebuilding the post-war world. The Marshall Plan, for example, poured billions of dollars into helping Western Europe recover. Smart move. A strong Europe meant strong trading partners and a buffer against the new global rival, the Soviet Union. This kicked off the Cold War, a decades-long ideological stare-down between capitalism and communism. NATO was formed, a military alliance to counter Soviet influence. It was a high-stakes game of chess, with nuclear weapons as the ultimate checkmate threat, casting a long shadow over international relations. Culturally, America was exporting its lifestyle to the world. Blue jeans, Coca-Cola, Hollywood movies, rock and roll music. American culture became global culture. Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, McDonald's, these became international symbols. The United States was also a hub for scientific and technological innovation. The space race with the Soviets culminated in America putting the first man on the moon in 1969. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Talk about a mic drop moment. This technological supremacy extended to computers, medicine, and many other fields, reinforcing its global leadership. Economically, the United States dollar became the world's reserve currency. American companies were global giants. The United States was the manufacturing heartland of the world, producing everything from cars to consumer electronics. This period wasn't without its internal struggles, like the Civil Rights Movement, which fought to make the promise of American equality a reality for all its citizens. But externally, especially after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, America stood as the sole superpower, the undisputed champion. It seemed like the American model had triumphed, and a new era of peace and prosperity was dawning, or so many hoped. Section 5. Cracks in the foundation, early signs of decline, the first tremors of trouble. After the Soviet Union threw in the towel in 1991, America was the last superpower standing. It was like winning the World Cup, the Olympics, and the Super Bowl all at once. Victory lap time, right? For a while it seemed that way. The 1990s brought economic growth, driven by the dot-com boom. The internet was taking off. It felt like a new golden age. But even during this period of unipolar dominance, some subtle shifts were happening. The kind of things you don't notice until they're a big deal, like a tiny crack in your phone screen that eventually spiders across the whole thing. Economically, globalization started to change the game. Manufacturing jobs, the bedrock of the American middle class, began to move overseas to countries with lower labor costs. China was emerging as an economic powerhouse, quietly building its manufacturing capacity. While American consumers enjoyed cheaper goods, the long-term impact on domestic industry was starting to be felt. The trade deficit grew. Deindustrialization wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow, steady erosion of what had once been a core American strength. This shift laid the groundwork for future economic anxieties and regional disparities. Foreign policy in this era also had its share of missteps. The interventions in Somalia, the Balkans, and later, the initial responses to terrorism showed the complexities and limitations of American power. The tragic events of September 11, 2001 were a massive shock to the system. They led to the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. These long, costly conflicts drained resources, strained international alliances, and had profound human costs. The initial global sympathy after 9/11 gradually eroded due to controversial foreign policy decisions, impacting America's moral standing on the world stage for some observers. Internally, political polarization began to deepen. The era of bipartisan cooperation seemed to be fading. News media became more fragmented and partisan. Issues like abortion, gun control, and climate change became increasingly divisive. The 2000 presidential election, decided by a handful of votes in Florida and ultimately by the Supreme Court, highlighted these growing divisions. These were the early warning signs. The foundation, while still strong, was showing cracks. The unipolar moment was perhaps shorter and more complicated than anyone had anticipated at its dawn. The stage was being set for more significant challenges ahead. Section 6, The Gathering Storm, Accelerating Decay, 2008-present, Economic Tremors and Social Rifts. The 2008 financial crisis was a wake-up call, or maybe a fire alarm, the kind you can't ignore. It started with risky mortgages, spread like wildfire through the global financial system, and led to the worst recession since the Great Depression. Millions lost their jobs, their homes. Big banks got bailouts. Regular folks got, well, not bailouts. This event seriously shook faith in the American economic model. The national debt, already significant, began to skyrocket. It went from around $10 trillion in 2008 to over $34 trillion by 2024. That's a lot of zeros. This debt burden raises concerns about future economic stability and intergenerational equity. This economic strain also highlighted and exacerbated wealth inequality. For decades, wages for many Americans had stagnated even as productivity increased. The rich got richer. The top 1% now own roughly 32% of the nation's wealth. That's a huge slice of the pie. This isn't just an economic statistic, it fuels social resentment and a sense that the system is rigged. While some sectors show promise, like the US solar industry, which saw record installations in 2024, or the projected increase in net farm income for 2025, thanks to government support, the broader picture of deindustrialization, especially in comparison to China's lead in manufacturing and tech like 5G and AI, remains a concern. Socially and culturally, the US has seen increasing fragmentation. Trust in institutions, including the government, is way down. According to Pew Research, only about 20% of Americans say they trust the government to do what is right. That's a big yikes. We're also seeing shifts in religious identity. The percentage of US adults identifying as Christian has declined from 78% in 2007 to 62% in a recent 2023 to 2024 survey, though it has stabilized recently. The number of religiously unaffiliated folks, or nones, has risen, especially among younger adults, with 43% of 18 to 24-year-olds identifying as such. This signals a changing cultural landscape. This era has also been marked by significant social upheaval and protest. Movements like Black Lives Matter gained prominence, highlighting issues of racial injustice and police brutality, especially after the murder of George Floyd. We've seen rising concerns about white nationalism and extremism. There's a well-documented mental health crisis, with increases in suicide rates, depression, and opioid addiction. Add to this an education system where US students lag in international comparisons, like ranking 38th in math according to PISA scores. These are not just isolated problems, they are interconnected symptoms of a society under stress, struggling with its identity and future direction. Section 7, The Shifting World Order, Accelerating Decay, 2008-present, Global Challenges and Political Fractures. On the global stage, America's position has become more complicated, more contested. The unipolar moment is definitely over. China's rise is undeniable. It's now a major economic and military power. China leads in manufacturing, has made huge strides in technology, and possesses the world's largest navy by number of ships. The US finds itself lagging in key areas like 5G infrastructure and certain aspects of AI development. This isn't just about economic competition, it's a rivalry for global influence, shaping alliances and international norms in the 21st century. The old dynamics are being rewritten daily. Military overstretch is another major challenge. Decades of conflict and commitments around the world have taken a toll. The withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021 was widely seen as a significant setback, raising questions about American reliability and strategic foresight. The US continues to grapple with maintaining influence in volatile regions like Ukraine and the Middle East, often finding its options limited and its resources strained. Meanwhile, alliances like BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, now expanding to include countries like Iran, are increasingly positioning themselves as an alternative, sometimes anti-US, bloc on the world stage, challenging traditional power structures. Then there's the political decay at home. The Trump era, 2016-2020, brought political polarization to new heights. It was characterized by deep divisions, challenges to democratic norms, and culminated in the January 6th insurrection at the US Capitol. An event that shocked the nation and the world. Congress often seems stuck in gridlock, with frequent threats of government shutdowns and an inability to tackle major national problems effectively. This political dysfunction not only hampers domestic progress, but also weakens America's image and influence abroad, making it harder to lead on global issues. Adding to these concerns is the slow erosion of the US dollar's dominance in international trade. Countries like China and Saudi Arabia are increasingly exploring or using other currencies for transactions. While the dollar remains the primary reserve currency for now, this trend signals a potential shift in the global financial architecture. This loss of undisputed global leadership, combined with domestic political turmoil and social fragmentation, paints a picture of a nation facing an accelerating decay of its once unquestioned supremacy. The challenges are multifaceted, deep-rooted, and demand serious attention if the trajectory is to be altered. Section 8, Crossroads of Destiny, Future Scenarios for the US. What's next? Collapse, comeback, or just chill? So where does America go from here? It's like we're at a choose-your-own-adventure moment in history. One possible path is a managed decline. This isn't necessarily a disaster. It means gracefully adapting to a multipolar world. The US would still be a major player, just not undisputed heavyweight champion. It would involve focusing on domestic renewal, strengthening alliances on more equal terms, and accepting that other nations will have a larger say in global affairs. Think of it as retiring from being CEO, but staying on as a respected board member. This requires strategic foresight and a willingness to recalibrate national ambitions. Another, more dramatic scenario is a sudden collapse. This sounds scary, and it is. This could be triggered by a severe economic crisis, like an unmanageable debt default, extreme political instability leading to widespread civil unrest, or a major military defeat. While many argue this is unlikely given America's inherent strengths, the combination of current stresses, political polarization, social fragmentation, economic vulnerabilities makes it a possibility that can't be entirely dismissed. History shows that empires can unravel surprisingly quickly when internal and external pressures mount beyond a tipping point. It's the nightmare scenario everyone hopes to avoid. But then there's the American revival scenario, the comeback kid story. This is the path where the US confronts its challenges head-on and emerges stronger. It would require significant reforms, tackling political polarization, investing heavily in education and infrastructure, addressing economic inequality, and fostering innovation. There are some green shoots. For example, the US solar industry is booming, with domestic manufacturing capacity for solar modules growing 190% year-over-year by the end of 2024, and cumulative solar capacity projected to triple by 2035. The farm sector, too, forecasts an increase in net income for 2025, partly due to government support. These could be building blocks. For a revival to happen, America would need to leverage its enduring strengths: a dynamic and diverse population, world-class universities, a culture of innovation, and abundant natural resources. It would mean finding common ground politically, something that seems incredibly difficult right now. It would also mean adapting to a changing world, not by trying to turn back the clock to 1950, but by leading in new areas like green technology and sustainable development. The potential for revival exists, but it demands a collective will and a clear vision for the future, moving beyond partisan squabbles to address fundamental national issues. Section 9, Conclusion and Empire at a Turning Point, the final word for now. So, we've been on quite the journey, haven't we? From a rebellious colony to a global superpower, and now to a nation grappling with some serious challenges. It's a story that's still being written every single day. The idea that all empires eventually decline is a historical truism. No nation, no matter how powerful, stays on top forever. The sun set on the Roman Empire, it's set on the British Empire. The question for America isn't its relative power will change, but it will manage that change, and what kind of nation it will be in this new chapter. The threats are clear. We've talked about them: economic inequality that hollows out the middle class, political polarization that paralyzes governance, social fragmentation that pulls at the seams of national unity, a national debt that looms large, deindustrialization in key sectors, and rising China that's reshaping the global balance of power. These aren't small potatoes. These are a five-course meal of complex problems that require more than just sound bites and quick fixes. They demand sustained effort, compromise, and a shared sense of purpose, which currently feels in short supply. But let's not forget the potential lifelines. America still has incredible strengths. Its innovative spirit hasn't vanished. Its universities are still magnets for global talent. Its demographic diversity can be a source of dynamism if harnessed correctly. The recent surge in domestic solar manufacturing shows that industrial policy can yield results. The resilience of its agricultural sector, even with government support, points to foundational economic capacities. The key is whether these strengths can be mobilized effectively to counter the forces of decline. It's a race against time and against internal division. Ultimately, the future of the US probably isn't a binary choice between sudden collapse and a glorious return to undisputed dominance. A more likely scenario is a period of continued adjustment, a kind of managed decline where America remains a very significant global player, but one among several. The American century might be over, but that doesn't mean America's story is. The next few decades will be crucial in determining whether this transition is relatively smooth or dangerously chaotic. It depends on the choices made today. No pressure, America. The world is watching.